Thanks very much for that, Minister. Fianna Fáil has given a guarded welcome to the new Climate Action Plan. We welcome the momentum that it provides following the declaration of a climate and biodiversity emergency in May. And we welcome that after 8 years of knowing inaction and, I suppose, deliberate delay in some respects, we have some sort of indication that this government may be about to treat the climate breakdown with seriousness it deserves. And I think that's largely down to the work that you have done in the relatively short period of time that you're in office, Minister. However, it is no climate revolution. I think we accept that. The students and the young people will not, and indeed should not, stop their calls for real action. The state has not become a leader on climate change overnight. Indeed, it is fair to say that this government has been far behind. In fact, has been led, instead of being led, has followed. The House should firstly express, I think, as you have done, Minister, the gratitude to the Citizens' Assembly for their extensive deliberations and comprehensive proposals on how climate action must be prioritised across all sectors. The Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action undertook an extensive examination of these proposals, leading to a landmark cross-party report in March, which included 42 separate recommendations. There was some difference of opinion, particularly on the taxation matter, but largely we agreed on the kind of work that has to be done to achieve the preservation and protection of the globe, as you rightly identified, Minister. I'd also like to thank other members on that committee for their commitment, and I think it is appropriate that that work be recognised. Thanks to input from a huge range of experts, I think the committee members have a good overview of government policy on climate change, but some background may also be useful to this House. It was interesting to see the Taoiseach and ministers take that one of the 3 hybrid buses in operation. I'm not sure that all of them would have been aware that the government has now also 3 climate-related plans in operation. The first, the National Mitigation Plan, was produced back in 2017, as you know. We had the National Development Plan in 2018, and it now seems these 2 previous plans may have been left behind in the 2 other hybrid buses, because we have moved on. The National Mitigation Plan was strongly criticised by national and international authorities for failing to tackle our rapidly rising emissions, which led to Ireland's climate laggard reputation. The government were then quick to highlight the increased investment in climate action under the subsequent National Development Plan, but neglected to mention that these proposed investments did not include any analysis of their climate impact. Unsurprisingly, this latest strategy clarifies that the government's National Development Plan will not achieve the reduction in polluting emissions that is required of it. So it remains the case that Ireland is not on track to meet its 2020 or 2030 commitments. And the fear is that there are those in government who appear to support paying millions in non-compliance costs rather than spending the millions on actions that will actually benefit citizens in due course. The new climate plan is also to be welcomed in that it has adopted the recommendations of the Joint Oireachtas Committee to introduce mechanisms to hold the government and relevant departments to account on their climate obligations, including an enhanced Climate Action Council, a new standing committee on climate action, and the introduction of a five-yearly carbon budgets. I think thanks to the committee, the House will have the opportunity to instil discipline and end the years of haphazard planning by the state or at state level. It is noted too that the new climate plan, that a delivery report on progress will be purchased each quarter, or will be produced each quarter. Can the Minister note when the first quarterly report will be published? And he might come back to us on that. He might also clarify the additional support and use of state resources that will be provided to the new council. Could the Minister also confirm that the Climate Action Amendment Bill noted in the plan will be prioritised and enhanced in 2019 and not merely published in 2019? Obviously, we'd like to get moving on that. Just on the area of targets, I'm somewhat concerned that certain recommendations and timelines from the cross-party Oireachtas Committee report have been rejected, despite the fact that the main government party supported these measures in the Oireachtas Committee's recommendations just 3 months ago. The government's new action plan does not include a net zero target to decarbonise the economy by 2050, stating that further analysis is necessary. How can we claim to support climate justice at international level if we appear to be questioning the need to put a Paris-aligned target in legislation? This target is also needed to send a clear signal to citizens, businesses and investors that there ultimately isn't wriggle room to get out of the kind of action that's needed. It seems to have been forgotten that the government produced an energy white paper in 2015 which included a 2050 objective to reduce Ireland's energy emissions by up to 95%. The new Climate Action Plan itself states that it includes a decarbonisation pathway towards 2030, which would be consistent with the adoption of a net zero target in Ireland by 2050. So the modelling for the new plan is also based on a net zero target, and at EU level the Government has known for some time that a net zero objective is being strongly supported. So maybe, Minister, you might, if you can, be clear as to why the Government were unable or unwilling to include this target in legislation. You have also noted that further analysis is necessary. You might outline what additional analysis the Government believes is necessary to address this matter. Now, at Wednesday's Budgetary Oversight Committee and at yesterday's committee meeting on the new plan, Fianna Fáil has sought information on the annual costs and savings of implementation of these measures. There are also real costs of delayed action, such as through congestion and air pollution. Maybe, Minister, you'll be able to clarify what are the costs and savings of the actions detailed in the plan. Minister, you've previously stated that 75% of the measures will not result in a net cost, but can you therefore provide specific information on the 25%? I would also welcome further information on the reassessment of expenditure commitments in the National Development Plan in light of the new climate strategy. Some 14 billion or 65% of the 22 billion investment envisaged for climate action in the National Development Plan is expected to come from non-exchequer sources. It might similarly clarify how much the costs of the new climate plan are expected to be met by the non-exchequer sources. I note the introduction of a 70% renewable target in the new climate plan, which the committee also recommended. A mix of renewable energy sources will need to be supported in the first round of the new renewable energy support schemes, including community projects, and the Minister might elaborate further on this point in due course. It is also particularly important that the state's offshore wind resource potential receives support under the new scheme. The Oireachtas Committee raised the need for a legislative framework for regulatory and licensing aspects of offshore wind as a matter of priority and recommended that the Maritime Area and Foreshore Amendment Bill is enacted by the end of 2019. It is encouraging that the new climate plan, the Government has committed to completing the necessary analysis there, aligning planning procedures and prioritising this bill in 2019, and you'll certainly get support from us in trying to achieve that, Minister. As I've stated, that Fianna Fáil has given this plan a guarded welcome, and it is hugely lacking in certain aspects, particularly in relation to transport. The plan includes no commitments to support rural transport services. The Joint Oireachtas Committee was clear that we need an assessment of rural travel demand, a target for modal shift and emissions reduction, as well as proposals for an integrated public transport network to include local link bus Éireann, private bus operators and school bus services. The plan merely notes that a review will take place. There isn't even an explanation of this commitment in the text, unlike all other actions. So can the Minister please explain why this is the case and why measures to improve rural public transport were not included? The report of the Joint Oireachtas Committee included several recommendations on public transport, active travel, and the current transport infrastructure programme should be revised to achieve at least 10% expenditure for cycling infrastructure. The Minister stated yesterday that it is not possible to run a bus up every rural laneway in Boreen, and I get that. He might enlighten the Dáil, though, as to how the houses at the end of every laneway in Boreen are going to be able to afford an electric car. It would be useful if the Minister could address this question, and perhaps maybe we need to get some further discussion with the Minister for Transport in relation to the gas. Regarding the specific commitment that Ireland will achieve 950,000 EVs by 2030, has the Minister any costing on the necessary infrastructure required? We understand that at the moment there is a huge interest in EV grants available through the SEAI, and to the extent that the SEAI may struggle to meet that demand. Has any analysis been undertaken on why the levels of grants and incentives would need to be put in place to achieve the figure that you have set out of almost $1 million? We also understand that the NTA purchased 200 highly polluting diesel buses last year, which will be in operation for 20 years and will continue to undermine our public health. Professor John Fitzgerald indicated at the Budgetary Oversight Committee that if the cost of carbon detailed in the updated Public Expenditure Code had been applied to these buses, their purchases would not have been permitted. So there's a gap in the thinking there. Were such purchases examined as part of the plan, and will it be cancelled in light of the revised Public Expenditure Code as well as the climate emergency declared last month? I also note that no reference is made in the Department's upcoming clean air strategy, notwithstanding the recent EPA findings on hugely damaging levels of air pollution. Can the Minister provide a specific date for publication of the Department's new clean strategy, which we have been waiting for more than a year now? I think I'm nearly out of time, but just in conclusion, there are a lot of other areas that we need to address, and I spoke yesterday at the committee particularly about the issue of the just transition, so that we're very clear that we don't leave communities behind. If we're to achieve what we're setting out to in this plan and others, it will require some communities facing much more change than others in terms of enterprises and employment, and the state is going to have to put in place, in my view, a task force that was identified in the Oireachtas report and also in the Citizens' Assembly to ensure that we don't end up with situations that have happened in other countries, particularly in the United States, where people in middle parts of America were left behind as the Rust Belt, as it became known, developed as we moved away from some of the more traditional industries. We can't afford that to happen here, for obviously it would have a very significant impact on getting people to change their behaviour in the way that we want, but it cannot be done in a way that disenfranchises entire communities. Thank you very much.